after the Great Reunion, the Council of Jerusalem, the decision of the elders, of the apostles, is transmitted to the new converts, and it is a letter, and it is borne by human beings. I recall the course in epistolography way back in student days in classics, how it was already a well-developed system, given the primitive means they had, that there was actually a way of getting correspondence from A to B within the Roman Empire. It's a study in itself. And I recall how it was always coupled with tapping on to the system of movement within the Roman Empire. It was therefore obviously based on physical movement each time. And that carried on, of course, until modern times. It was more or less developed according to the country and the culture, but essentially communication, until the invention of distance communication through initially the great development in the telephone, that it was always written in form. The telephone, although initially highly specialized and reserved, became fairly quickly generalized and changed completely the nature of urgent communication. There was the intermediary step of signals being sent. Of course, there are smoke signals in Aboriginal countries, but the signals were telegraphed, wired, as they say. And I still recall having sent one or two telegrams. They were quite expensive and they had to be very short. But it was an urgent way of getting a message from A to B, still in existence in the 70s. And I recall also how in that same period, for instance, messages from Oxford might come and go. I recall how at home the Royal Mail arrived in the form of a human being on a motorbike, and it was a telegram for my brother, and when we discovered its content we were overjoyed. He was being given what they call a Mailing exhibition, and that meant going to Oxford, and that was the result of a human being coming to the door. By now, it's only, I suppose, one generation later, but the whole notion of communication has changed quite radically. There was, in university days, one means already available, which a couple of friends of mine would use, and it was to send an audio cassette through the post. Therefore the voice was going from A to B. But that wasn't immediate, and it was also complex with regard to the answer. Telephones, of course, were expensive from one city to another. Long-distance calls, we used to call them. But still, these were means of spending quality time with a person and had a certain privacy and intimacy, quality time, because one prepared and even booked the call. Phoning home every week was an important event in college days. And important things would happen, of course, in a phone call. as in a letter. Now, as it happens, I still recall how in university days it was an agreement between a friend of mine and myself that we would keep corresponding between our university colleges in different places, and theoretically one letter a week would go. But these letters, if kept, could retell those years, and I think he kept them for years, and they would contain all kinds of interesting comments and even little pictures, designs, which might still make one smile. It was a whole art, but they were letters worth keeping. And after my parents' death, we had to clear all the archives out. The house was being sold. And in fact, my brother right now is going through my father's correspondence again. And he tells me they are quite interesting because they are letters from the time when they were, of course, in a war situation. He was in the army. And there are interesting descriptions of what's going on here and there. And we also found, well put aside and in chronological order, the letters that about 4 times a year I could write home from France, because the monastic regime was very strict, but none of them were thrown away, and they're still there, pictures and all, in the margin. So letters can have a long life, and also can tell a lot. I remember one of my brethren in France, Don Norbert, saying, on se livre, one outpours oneself. The letter contains the soul. And therefore, when doing epistolography way back, I remember how I saw the power and value of a well-written letter. Pliny the Younger, there's a wealth in his volume of letters about life at that time. Ghost stories, the eruption of Vesuvia, and so on. Fascinating material, well written and worth rereading. And if they had not been kept, actually quite often by our own monks actually, these monks recopied old manuscripts, humanity would be the poorer. In France, there are wonderful letters, little essays and the like, which are gems. Montalembert and so on. Madame de Savigny, wonderful things, interesting to read again, and well written. Classics, but letters. And one sees also, as recently as John Henry Newman, how epistolography can be brought to great heights. I recall how at Bangor, a young student who actually became a Catholic at university was taking advantage of the fact that all the letters of John Henry Newman were in the library. And we have, in his case, I believe, not only his answers, because he wrote also a copy for himself, but also a good bit of the correspondence coming to him. And so we can reconstruct history. But what comes forth is the quality of each letter from his pen, high English and poignant expressions, well-sharpened thought, logical, sometimes ironical, and able to blow up a weak argument. The mind still present on the page. It's something that only in an enclosed community one becomes fully aware of, the power of a letter. I recall again Don Norbert commenting one time how Don Montoine, he had been novice master or junior master, and he had been moved to another monastery which was in foundation, and he had left a good memory of Selignac, but before going he'd shared something with Don Norbert, must have been some class or something, and he was commenting how this letter had come. And he looked at the cover of the letter and looked at the stamp. And as Don Norbert put it, il en a fait l'exégèse, he made the exegesis of the stamp. And his own comment was, timbre poste, a postage stamp. In other words, everything was huge in enclosure. And so that gives some idea of how a letter could be a time bomb with regard to the effect it could have in solitude. No television, no excursions, no talking practically. A letter, therefore, was a big event, and any news from outside was even bigger. I make a jump, and it's a big jump. In 2020, how many letters arrive? They are precious commodities. The mystique of receiving an envelope, of opening it physically, of seeing who has written, and of engaging with thought well expressed. It's oftentimes difficult to find. And what do we find in its place? Bleep! The message is badly written, grammatically incorrect, to be cast aside and, as we say, deleted, forgotten forever, certainly never reread by anyone else, perhaps just as well. We have even evolved a language for short messages, full of words shortened. Very different from the High English of Newman, but also indicating how much we think of the value of a letter. Now, there are two problems here. One is that much energy is going into what is going to be thrown away. The mentality of throwing away energy, mental energy and time, is now the norm. There is a famous picture in Holland of a young lady standing by the piano reading a letter. The title is simply The Letter. One of her sisters is at the piano, somebody else is looking on, and there is a tension in the air. Everyone wants to know what's in the letter. A letter can change a life. It is by letters sometimes that relationships, at least in the past, could be developed and led thereby to a lasting relationship and a marriage and a family. It was worked upon carefully and well. A letter could express and convey, emit and release huge warmth and consolation at the other end. As, in reverse, a bad letter could do quite the opposite and have a devastating effect. What a letter could mean in the trenches, in the war. In fact, we were near the Somme in 2010, and we were reading some of the correspondence in Welsh. It was sad. Of course, those who wrote such letters didn't come back, and they were giving little homely details to and from the family until they were blown up by a grenade. But the letters survived and still speak to the heart. How much one can learn about a soul through a letter. I recall in Rome how I shared one time with, it was the good French Epistologist who would hear my confession every week, how, because he was helping me with my research, how I was getting to know the soul of Adam Scott, the one I was doing research on, and he simply said, "Je n'ai fait maintes fois l'expérience. I have made many times the experience of it myself. One gets to know the soul of the person that one is researching. One gets to know his language, one sees his thought, one even catches his sense of humour. Ah, that's him again. One knows him inside out. His soul is present on the page." How many of those will be left when we have gone? Our culture has gone for the cheap and the immediate. So much so that although we have quantity, we have very often lost any depth of quality. I heard on the grapevine that in recent times some mystic soul had received this message from the Lord. I haven't been able to verify it, but I throw it out. It was this, that immediate communication had got to such a point on earth that he was going to have to interrupt it. The reason being that he cannot get through. We are ruled by the bleep that we are addicted to. We go back to our comfort zone. The words, more words, and many more words again that come and rock us to sleep on the screen. We cannot bear the sound of silence, and we feel no more the depth of one written word. It is not strong enough anymore to captivate our attention. We are made numb by over-bombardment of words, and we have lost completely the feel of the power of a word resonating in the vacuum, because vacuum no more there is. I wrote this now, pondering what a letter could be, if so we let it. Letters are no more. What is a morsel that can hold a soul upon its inches square? What lingers there between rim and little rim, wherein the whole of man is left to lie, is left all bare to be reheard and seen again, again, as oft as this small space a place is given within the field of gazing, that its pain may ever trace in this heart shed and riven. What is this bomb that time can detonate upon some morrow yet? What force within the folds that this sheet holds will resonate tomorrow and tomorrow, looking in? What is a letter but a grain of thought that some are brushed aside and some are